Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's business studies lesson. The focus of today's lesson will be business sectors and their environments. However, we will be focusing on application questions on the business sectors and their environments. Let us start with the first application question. The instruction says to us, read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. Remember, with application, we want to see your skills, your analytic skills, and you should be able to identify aspects from the scenario that would give you answers to your questions. Hence, we say read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have a scenario on Alpha Mines, AM. Alpha Mines specializes in the extraction of platinum. Their supplier of mining equipment has increased their prices by more than 20%. The supervisor does not have a good working relationship with his employees, and AM can no longer export their products due to an increase in the exchange rate. Remember, we are supposed to answer questions that follow. Our first question is to identify the business sector in which Alpha Mines operate and motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario. That is the first question. The second one requires us to quote 3 challenges that are affecting Alpha Mines from the scenario above. And the third one says classify each challenge according to the 3 business environments. So what is key after understanding your questions is to now look back into your scenario to say, what was the scenario talking about? Underline the most important information so that you're in a better position to answer your questions. So you have Alpha Mines, who specializes in the extraction of platinum, and they also have suppliers of their mining equipment who has increased the prices by more than 20%. Another challenge they have is that the supervisor does not have a good working relationship with his employees, and AM can no longer export their products due to an increase in the exchange rate. So what is key here is that you should identify where each problem is occurring, whether is it coming inside or outside. And again, you should consider the issue of extent of control to say, does the business have control over the challenge or not? So that is the first aspect, and that is the first approach you should use to analyze this scenario. So you should also look into the question now to say, the first question requires you to identify the sector which Alpha Mines operates. And when you look into the first sentence now, it gives you an indication on the solution. So let us start now looking into ways to answer the question. Now, this is how you answer your question. You go back to your first question, identify the business sector in which Alpha Mines operate and motivate to show. So when you check the scenario, Alpha Mines operates in the extraction of platinum, and you think to say, I have 3 business sectors. Which sector talks about extraction? You should be knowing that the sector that talks about extraction is your primary sector, because extraction has to do with taking natural resources from nature, and those natural resources should not be man-made. So as you can see, platinum is not man-made, so it was taken from nature. So the answer is primary. But there's a question again, or a follow-on, that says motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario. You are not only supposed to identify, you have to motivate as well. So how do you motivate? You quote from the scenario. So the quoting should be clear. You quote everything and each and every part of the sentence so that you show that you are confident with your motivation. So your motivation would then be Alpha Mine specializes in the extraction of platinum. That is a full quote. That is how you motivate your answer. So that then would give you a full mark or full credit for such a response. So remember, whenever they say quote, you need to quote the sentence fully. So that is how you should go about answering question 1, which required you to identify the sector and motivate by quoting. So you quoted by taking, as you saw, we quoted by taking this statement from the scenario to show evidence that this now falls under the primary sector because we saw the word extraction of platinum. Then as we move, we look into question 2 now. Question 2 required us to identify or quote challenges. So we quoted the first sentence there just after the introduction that Alpha specializes in platinum. We quoted the idea that their supply of mining equipment have increased their price by more than 20%. That is one of the quotes. Then that becomes correct because this is a challenge. The supplier increasing the cost, meaning this is a challenge to a business because it increases the cost now for the business to operate. So that is the first challenge. Another challenge then, this is the first challenge, and then the second challenge would be the idea that now the supervisor does not have a good working relationship with his employees. This is a challenge as well because we are talking about the supervisor who should be managing, who should be giving the employees confidence. So if that supervisor does not have a good working relationship with the employees, it becomes a challenge, which can also affect productivity of the business. So that is the second quotation that shows a challenge. And then the third one is the idea that AM can no longer export their products due to an increase in the exchange rate. So that is the third challenge there, and we quoted that challenge from the scenario. Keep in mind that you cannot quote things that are not on the scenario. Make sure that you quote sentences directly from the scenario. So AM can no longer export their products due to an increase in the exchange rate. So this makes it expensive for AM to sell to other countries because they cannot export, because it becomes expensive, and anything that becomes expensive, then it is a challenge for a business. So that is how you are supposed to deal with question 2 on quoting challenges from the scenario. And then as we move on, we have question 3 now. With your question 3, we have market, micro, and macro. The issue here was that you are supposed to link now the challenges. So the market environment would link with the first challenge that we noted that was saying their supplier. So the idea that we are talking about a supplier is a component from the market environment. So the idea of a supplier there becomes the linking to say this challenge is from the market environment because the supplier has increased the price by more than 20%. Then we have micro as the second classification, which is linking as well to the second challenge, talking about now the supervisor who does not have a good working relationship with his employees. So looking into that, a supervisor is a component of the micro environment because a supervisor is a manager or is part of the levels of management that are within the business. So a supervisor there, that is your tip to say a supervisor is within the working environment and they don't have a good working relationship with some of the workers who are within, and that tells us that workers who are within now, the business has full control over such. And then AM can no longer export their products due to an increase in the exchange rate. That is a challenge that is on the macro environment, especially because of the idea of the exchange rate. So the classification should be clear and should link to the challenge that you identified in question 2. So that is a challenge for question for question 3, and then that is question 2, and that is quoting the challenge for 1. So that would be your challenges. And then looking into another question there in your another question, we have to identify the business sector represented by each statement below. So the focus here is on the business sectors. We have Sam's Bakery, who produces fresh fresh birthday cakes. And then we also have B. With your B, we are looking into Super Energy enterprise, which produces maize meal and instant soft porridges. And then we have Cheeky Chicks, which specializes in poultry farming and selling livestock to various businesses. So what is your role here? Your role is to identify the sector represented by each statement below. So you should be know immediately we say business sectors, you should be thinking about the 3 business sectors, your primary, secondary, and tertiary. However, for you to get your full marks, you should be able to link to say with alphabet A, this sector is, with alphabet B, this sector is, and with alphabet C, this sector is. So Sam's Bakery produces fresh birthday cakes, and then we have Super Energy Enterprise, which produces maize meal, and then we have Chicken Chicks. So Sam Bakery, we look into the type of business or the type of industry. This should be tertiary sector. Then we have what now? Super Energy Enterprise. They produce maize meal and instant porridge. This should be secondary sector. And then we also look into Cheeky Chicks, which specializes in poultry farming and selling livestock. Then this would be your primary sector. So this is how you go about answering the questions based on statements provided. So make sure that you analyze and you understand, and that approach will help you. And also underline the keywords so that you're in a better position to get your accurate answers. So with that, I'll just like us to take a short break.